Members of Durban Search and Rescue are racing against the clock to find 4 people who went missing during a flash flood at the weekend. 2 people from Verulam and 2 from Othongathi remain unaccounted for. 11 people died in torrential downpours across KwaZulu-Natal, which caused destruction and infrastructure damage. Coastal areas such as Lucia and Umhlanga Rocks were also hard hit. On Saturday night, torrential rains caused havoc in Durban and surrounding areas, especially along the North Coast. Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs officials say the KZN Basic Education Department is assessing schools in the city ahead of the reopening on Wednesday. Let's stay with this particular story now and look at the impact that this is likely to have on infrastructure. And we're speaking to the CEO of the South African Water Chamber, and we also have Dr. Jennifer Mulandwa, CEO of Water Research Commission. And in fact, we do have Benoit Le Roy, South African Water Chamber CEO. Let me thank you so much for your time. We heard earlier, Benoit, I'm going to start with you, from the eThekwini Mayor Mxolisi Kaunda talking about infrastructure that has been left damaged as a result of the rains and the difficulties that the city now has in trying to conduct the assessment to look at the extent of the damage. But while people are worrying about not having water and not having electricity in some of the areas, is there a threat of contaminated water as well?
Yes, hi to you and to the viewers. Unfortunately, this is a repeat of the 2 previous floods we had, where our water systems are somewhat vulnerable for a host of reasons. And, the intense storms that we have, got one now in Gauteng at the moment, they tend to test the vulnerable infrastructure, and it's not going to get better. And the problem is we've had a lot of E. coli in our rivers and onto our beaches with these washaways, and also a lot of the informal settlements where people have no choice. But what happens is these get washed away and the pollution with it too. So, the rains really wash everything into rivers and the sea, and we land up with everybody else's, pollution. And, we have to reinstate not only the infrastructure, we have to manage those assets, but we also have to manage the urban planning. We can't leave and put people into areas that are prone to flooding, and a lot of these areas are not serviced for a host of reasons. And what happens is a lot of that sewage lands up, into our water courses and the likes. So from a tourism and a dignity perspective, it doesn't look good at all.
And the fact that, it also, you think about the fact that the mayor earlier on saying that some people are even building and continuing to build along flood lines. But I wonder, Jennifer, then, if we are to look at the state of water right now and some of the concerns around the health risks, I wonder then, what dangers does this pose for people?
Thank you very much for the invitation, and firstly, just the condolences for the loss of life, and we obviously know that some people are still missing. The danger to the quality and the health of people, really we have to stop, doing the paying lip service to some of these issues and really addressing them hands-on. What I mean by that is that where we know that these areas have been identified as flood-prone, and we know that there are people that have settled there formally or informally, we really need to start going on a serious campaign of educating and making people aware of the dangers and ensuring that we move these people from areas such as these and into areas where there may be safety. The problem is that, when these settlements sometimes start, they just start, one by one, and then the whole thing grows up. But we also realize that according to the bylaws and the municipal bylaws or the municipal legislation, it's that when people have settled for a number of years, then you have to provide infrastructure. And I think it's high time we really start making climate change integral to what we are planning, and to make sure that our communities are made aware of the dangers to their health, to their livelihoods, and to also start at a disaster level. Also to look at some of the package treatment plants that we have. For some of them will be sanitation treatment plants, some of them will be drinking water provision plants, and make sure that at district level where disaster has to be handled, we can be able to address this. And I want to also reiterate that flash floods are very difficult to even model or predict. but where they happen, at least we should be able to have a communication drive and to be able to respond quickly and be prepared as we respond, and not procure now the requirements, the dire needs of people from a health perspective and water availability perspective when there is such a disaster.
Benoit, is there though, capacity to be able to plan and factor in climate change in some of the plans? And I ask this because there's a lot of concern, even as we speak in 2024, about infrastructure maintenance, something we've spoken about for years. So if we now have to move another layer to climate change, is there capacity for such planning?
Well, the city's technocrats explained to us last year quite eloquently at a symposium that the flash floods in Prospecton were totally avoidable. And there was two contributory factors. One was the Shongweni Dam is quite silted up, so the buffering capacity is not there to absorb the increased flows. Secondly, the canal that goes through the southern basin wasn't maintained and was breached in two places that were well known that had to be sorted out. So a lot of it is preventable. But one thing that we haven't factored in our town planning is that with climate change, we have more intense storms. So we have the same amount of water in the system, but it's in a shorter period, the same volume. And that is quite detrimental. Now, what we've done with a lot of the informal and semi-formal dwellings and developments, we've taken away the wetlands. And wetlands are sponges that absorb these. Okay, we've seen it in Mozambique, where a lot of the wetlands have been destroyed. In South Africa, a huge portion been destroyed. What happens is you end up with floods. So we have to reinstate these sponges. So I believe most of it's avoidable. The problem is, the state of our infrastructure is 97% not compliant in the sewage perspective. On water, it's about 50-60%. And the surrounding macro hydrological assets are in unknown states. They are good and bad. It's quite mixed. And then the uncontrolled urban development, that's a cocktail for disaster, unfortunately, that people really don't deserve. So most of it's avoidable, but we see a lot of the climate change impact where water is by far the biggest one globally, is we do have incidents, but the loss of life is limited and the loss of property and assets are also limited. So we need to really up our game because we're very, very vulnerable. So yes, we can mitigate most of it.
And Jennifer, then listening to that, it's something, and listening to what you said earlier on, there's a lot that can be done to try and, curtail some of what we are seeing unfold before our eyes. And I wonder if the officials are watching this evening and we're hearing that there's, rains expected for later this week in KwaZulu-Natal, what do they begin to do now in the short term to be able to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we're counting the loss of life once again?
I think, as I've said before, one of the key issues that we probably are short of is the early warning systems, right? Mm. And where we do have early warning systems and we have got source that's warning us that it's going to rain, we are looking at the areas, we know where the flood-prone areas are. Do we have a communication protocol that is quick enough? Are our communities empowered and trained to know that when we have these floods, this is what needs to happen? Now, at the disaster level, which on the disaster side, which is handled at district level, are we on the operation committee, or they call it joint operation center, where we are now watching this and saying what needs to happen? What is the likelihood that people will be affected? What will those people need? They will need alternative shelter. Where would that be? They would need drinking water. Where would we source that from? They would need sanitation services. Where do we source that from? So that becomes a whole package of where technocrats or civil servants have to really be actively involved in making sure that we are going to be able to address this matter. But that also being said, I think we have said there are basics that need to be taken care of. Is our stormwater system and the drainage system able to take this volume and able to dissipate it and take it to wherever it needs to go? If not, then that is a critical area that we need to look at. Do we have disaster preparedness, as I have said? Yeah. But also, lastly, communication and empowering people. Remember that when you need to move people, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to get people from outside. Are the very people living within that community empowered on how to act during these type times where there's these kind of disasters.
Yeah.
And in that way, be able to avert the loss of life, or at least be able to avoid it.
So, Benoit, then finally, what happens? Someone is watching us tonight, and we've spoken about this on the show before, but let's help them again. Someone is wondering, is the water safe? Can I drink it? And they're in KwaZulu-Natal right now. They are not sure what to look out for to make sure that water is safe for consumption.
So I think if it's not coming out of your tap and it's not clear, and you're in an area that has been flooded to an extent, the precautionary principle would be to let it settle and then to boil it if you want to cook or wash with it or drink it. I think we need the likes of Gifts of the Givers, etc., and corporate South Africa to start mobilizing some bottled water. I'm against it, but not in emergencies, because I think that's a very good source of trying to keep people safe. And I think awareness, as Jennifer mentions, is a big thing. We need to mobilize communities to be aware that if in doubt, precautionary principle, boil the water, bottled water, etc. I know bottled water is expensive, but there's a lot of NGOs and likes that can help. And the city needs to come. There's a lot of people working. There's a lot of capable people. The city needs to just up its game. We knew a week ago in the farming community and agriculture, we knew these rains were coming. So, did we mobilize? I'm not so sure. The damage doesn't seem to be that. It's never foolproof. But I think we just need to up our game, and I think we need to put pressure on local government to up its game. This is serious stuff. It's complicated, and you must put the best players on the table and protect people. So I think precautionary principle, applies, and if in doubt, ask. Social media is very good at that. Ask, and but don't. If there's been floods in your particular area, and that, please do not wade in the water. Do not try and drink the water or wash in the water. Not initially, because that water is probably compromised. So let's just be have the precautionary principle at hand.
All right. Let me thank you both for your time, and we will try to, speak to the officials as well, because you're both raising very critical points. And Jennifer, it's something we've spoken about on the show before. The early warning systems, where are they? How are the protocols there? What's going on? And we'll try and just find out a bit more about that. But let me thank you both for your time. Do appreciate it this afternoon. That was the CEO of the South African Water Chamber, Benoit Le Roy, and also Dr. Jennifer Mulwantwa, CEO of Water Research Commission.